What's going on, guys? Back for another fight night. This one is lacking. That I will tell you guys. Anytime you got Rozenstruik on a main event, you guys know what the rest of the card probably looks like. Although, even though it doesn't have a lot of name value, there are some pretty good fights. You don't really realize it until you start breaking them down. Excuse me, I still got this cough. Let's go a little bit about last week, though. Last week was very interesting. I got to be totally serious here. I didn't see some of these coming. We were on the right side of some of them. But I think for the first time in a very long time, I got both the co-main and main event wrong. Royval came out. He did what he had to do. I do believe Moreno won the fight, but he didn't deserve to win the fight. So if that makes any sense. The reason why I say that, because when you look at the numbers, when you look at Royval's punch stats, they look very high. 500 strikes. But a lot of them were just pitter-pat strikes that were hitting his forearm. They weren't really getting through. But the one thing I noticed about Moreno is he was doing things that I've never seen him do before. Really loading up on his punches, ducking his head. I was saying that as soon as the first round started, like, what is he doing? And at first I thought maybe he was trying to find his range a little bit. Maybe he was trying to back him off a little bit. But it continued on for the rest of the fight. Even his takedowns, when he was trying to get a takedown, he wasn't even going for him. He was just kind of resting on him. I don't know if that had to do with altitude. I don't know if he was dealing with an injury. But it wasn't the Brendan Moreno that we're so used to seeing. So, kudos to Royval. Kudos to people who picked him. I do believe picking Royval, you were kind of doing it blind. I just never thought in a million years I would see Moreno fight like that. As far as Yair and Ortega, that was the fight I told you where if there was going to be an upset, I would see it happen in that fight before the main event. I really thought Moreno was going to win that main event. Yair came out good. He looked sharp. And then he just faded. And Ortega does what he does. And I said, in my article, I said it in the podcast, I said on the show, I said if there's one path to victory for Ortega, you cannot give him a position that he wants, because if you give him the position that he wants, he's going to secure it. The thing with Ortega is that I never thought he was a great fighter. And does he win fights? Yes. Did he win this fight? Yes. But there comes a point in time where you can't fight like he fights. He tends to lose until he wins. That's going to end up biting him in the ass at some point. You know what I mean? It's going to end up biting the ass at some point. If you look at the landscape of his entire career, the guy just loses and loses until he wins. There was a situation in the last fight against Yair where I thought maybe if Yair puts it on him enough, there's a situation because they're friends. There's a stark difference between putting someone into submission and putting them to sleep or making them tap out than actually putting it on them with hands and knocking them out. And I said, I used Bush as a comparison. I said, if me and Bush were to ever fight, I would be fine with submitting him. I'd be fine with putting him in a rear naked choke, letting him tap out, or even letting him go to sleep. But I would not be okay with laying strikes on him. Like, I would pull my punches back. I wouldn't be able to do it. Yair came out and he did it, though. Yair literally came out and he did it, and I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised because I thought he would pull back his punches a little bit, but that did make me nervous. But then he came out in the second round after Ortega was dead to rights after the first round, and he gave Ortega what he wanted, and that's how it ended. A couple other fights on the card. Manuel Torres bit me in the butt a little bit. I picked Torres, but I picked him by knockout, and he ended up submitting him. The Barcelos-Quinones fight, Quinones was winning until he lost. The Charas did what he was supposed to do. The Ziam fight, I don't know how a judge gave that fight to Puelles, even though Ziam got the win. There was a judge that had it for Puelles. I don't even know how he won a round. He didn't even win a round. So overall, the card was good. The card was it started off a little shaky with Silva and Nemov with the injury, but overall it was a super fun card. And you got to expect it with cards like that, right? Because you have these lighter weight guys are a lot more snappier, they're quicker, more action. So I knew it was going to be a good, fun card, but I also knew it was going to be kind of all over the place. So, another thing is, guys, for those that may have subscribed, I got a message on Twitter. And I usually don't bring this stuff up, but I got a message on Twitter from a subscriber, messaging me, I love your breakdowns and stuff like that, but you got two main events wrong in the last 2 weeks. Guys, listen, relax with this. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I don't have a crystal ball. At the end of the day, you're not getting any more detailed breakdowns than you're anywhere else. I go deep dive into all the breakdowns, what they're good at, what they're not good at, what their paths to victory are. I give you every possible thing that you need. I'm not going to get them right all the time. It's the fight game. That's what it is. And if you're sending me messages like that, you obviously don't understand the fight game. So, I mean, how many times have we seen guys come in just completely shell up or not look like themselves or completely abandon their game plans or get caught or slip on a banana? It happens. Like, this is the fight game. This is what happens. If it was predicted all the time at 100% clip, Vegas would not be around. This would not be even taking place. Gambling would not be as big as it is. Everybody would be millionaires. So, like, if you're new to the game and you're new to this wheelhouse, you got to understand that. And if you don't understand that, then this game ain't for you. Like, you're not going to win all the time. All you can do is take the best information you can get and then formulate your own opinion on it. If you don't agree with me, you don't have to agree with me. There was guys in my Discord that didn't agree with me. There were guys in my Discord that took Ortega. There was guys in my Discord that took royval. They take what I give them, which is the most detailed stuff that you can get, and they formulate their own opinion. And that's what makes it fun. We could trash talk each other in the Discord. I was trash talking people about Ortega. They were trash talking me about Yair. I was trash talking people about royval. They were trash talking to me about, Moreno. So that's the fun part of it. But all I can do is use my expertise of the years and years of knowledge that I have and break the fights down and give you exactly what I see and the best paths to victory and who I think on a percentage scale is probably going to win. So if you're going to send me messages like that, like, this game ain't for you. It's just not. Anyway, let's get into this card. Lackluster of a card. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it. Just for the mere fact is I don't think it deserves that much of our attention. I will be honest with you. I always am honest with you and my subs. I will tell you that it's not a card you want to heavily invest in. We tend to do better, us as a group, at the madlabmma.com. And if you want those full breakdowns and you want the DFS and the things and, the projections and the outcome predictions and stuff like that, then you can go to madlabmma.com. We got multitude of memberships. Now that, football is over, this is when it really starts heating up. So, and we're on a pretty good run as far as no breaks. So we got UFC 299 coming up. We got UFC 300 coming up. So now's the time definitely to jump in. So go to the madlabmma.com and take advantage of that. But as far as this card goes, we tend to do better on cards that have smaller group of fights. It's always been that way for us. I don't know why. A lot of people like to have like those 13 and 14 fights. When we have like 10, 11 fights, like that's when like my guys tend to shine. And I've just noticed the pattern of that. So this is one of those cards where I could see we would probably have a really good DFS night. But you got to be careful because there's a lot of guys on here that are looking to prove points. There's a lot of guys on here that are getting opportunities that are looking to prove points. And there's guys that have their backs against the wall. And if they don't win, they could be looking at an exile. So you got to be careful with cards like this, especially when the names aren't super name value. They have an opportunity on a little bit bigger of a stage to showcase in front of the UFC brass and showcase in front of the people. Guys like Gaziev, who literally on Twitter has like 2,000 followers, I think. Like he has like, if he wins this fight and wins it in spectacular fashion, watch how quick his stock rises. So these are the kind of fights that you have on this card. So you do got to be careful. But I think I got a pretty good grasp on it. We're going to start off with the main event. Start off with Rozenstruik and Gaziev. This is a fight that you always got to remember it's the heavyweight division, right? Heavyweight division, anything can happen. It takes one shot with these guys. And you make a mistake and you get caught and the night's over. So I don't care if you're a minus 800 favorite. When you're dealing with a heavyweight, the heavyweights will heavyweight. But when you look at this, how do you break this down? And you got to look at the overall body of work of Biggie Boy Rozenstruik. This is a guy who, he fought a lot of very good fighters, and he's had his ups and his downs. But the one thing I will tell you about this guy is that he's so stuck in his ways with his striking that he never really transcended his game. And one of the biggest holes in his game was his grappling. His grappling has always been a hole in his game. So if you literally walk into the cage with that game plan, I'm going to strike with him until I don't need to anymore, you can absolutely beat him because he's not a guy who has any kind of buck and rolls. He doesn't have any sweeps. Once he's on his back, he's like a turtle in the shell, and that's about it. And the only defense he has to that is to kind of turtling up, going to his all fours and trying to get up that way. With that, you're giving up your back. If you got somebody that knows how to grapple, he's going to take advantage of that. So that's the one thing about Rozenstruik that concerns me. When Rozenstruik stays on his feet, if you tell me for 15 or for 25 minutes Rozenstruik is staying on his feet, he will not get taken down in this fight, you're looking at a guy who can beat anybody in the heavyweight division when it comes to striking. He's very clean. He's very polished. He's very patient. He's got good power. But the problem is once you get him down to the floor, he's got serious issues. Now he's taking a guy on in Gaziev who has good power as well. It's not really truly his forte, but this guy can grapple. This guy should look to take this fight to the ground. So when you're dealing with these heavyweights and you're dealing with guys that can ultimately have the power, you don't need major power in the heavyweight division and knock another heavyweight out. You need power. And he has power, and he's a big guy. He's going to be bigger than Rozenstruik. He's 6'4". He uses up all of that heavyweight division at 265. Same reach. The thing that concerns me here is the undefeated record, 12-0. You know how I feel about that. Like, it's going to come, right? Eventually it's going to come. But this is just a guy with more paths to victory. He really does. He has more paths. I don't know if we've seen the clear blueprint on how to beat Shamil yet, but we've seen the clear blueprint on how to beat Rozenstruik. And Gaziev has that. He has that ability to expose that. So with that said, can Rozenstruik catch him? Absolutely. Can Rozenstruik knock him out? Can he freeze in the lights? And Rozenstruik's been in this spot a couple times, and it's really no big deal to him. Absolutely. The 12-0 record, maybe a little bit of pressure on Gaziev to perform, big spot, absolutely. Like, all these things can play in, but if you're looking at a path perspective on who has more clear paths to win, it's kind of easy to see that Gaziev wins this fight. So I'm going to go Gaziev. I'm going to go Gaziev inside the distance. I think his ability to take the fight to the ground, I don't think he needs a sub, even though I think Rozenstruik will probably try to turtle up at one point. It's a situation where Shamil can maybe take the back, take the neck, or maybe just ground and pound him. He's got that big 6'4", 265 frame that when he centers his weight on top of you, a guy like Rozenstruik's going to have big issues getting up. So you might see him flattened out, turtled face down, and Gaziev finishes him that way. So I think he's going to have his pick of appetizer or dinner if he gets him into that position. If he can't get him into that position, or he decides to stand, which I think is a stupid game plan, then all of a sudden Rozenstruik's stock continues to rise as the fight goes on. But giving him 25 minutes to ground this thing, I think he only needs to ground it once or twice to finish this. So I got to go Gaziev inside the distance. Next fight, we got an interesting fight, Victor Petrino and Tyson Pedro. And the reason why it's interesting, it's more interesting on the Victor Petrino side, the Vitor Petrino side, for the mere fact that, Tyson Pedro came into the UFC, and this was a guy that, like, when that whole Aussie movement, came over, he was one of the leaders. He was like one of the guys that, like, everybody was looking to, even the UFC. Good looking guy, marketable, had a decent skill set, tied a couple wins in a row. And then all of a sudden, it's just like he started to digress. He started to get hurt. He started to, not really well round out his game. Like, he never evolved. And that evolution could have been stunted by, his injuries, all the time off and stuff like that. Then he comes back and he makes a little bit of a comeback. What does the UFC do? He leaves since 2018. He comes back in 2021, which is a decent layoff. Comes back, he fights Ike Villanueva, who was old as the hills, and he beats him, no longer in the UFC. He beats Harry Hunsucker, no longer in the UFC, horrible. Then he goes against a guy who's moderately good in Bukauskas, and he loses to him. Comes back in his last fight, and he beats the Pleasure Man, which I actually picked Pedro to win that fight. I don't know why people were on Antov in that fight so heavily. I think it was more not his skill set. I think it was more because they weren't believers in Pedro. And I'm not a believer in Pedro. I think Pedro's very, very talented, but I think sometimes he's his worst enemy, right? So now he's going against a guy in Vitor Petrino who's a unit. I mean, let's face it, the guy's a unit. The guy beat Bukauskas, he beat Prashniau, he beat Pleasure Man, he beat Rodolfo Bellato. So, this is all within the UFC, these four fights. So he's on a kind of a 4-fight win streak if you want to count the Contender Series, right? The guy's cardio checks out. The guy's athletic ability checks out. The guy's power checks out. Like, everything with this guy kind of checks out, but he's never really been dragged into these deep waters with a guy that can kind of meet him universally everywhere. You know what I mean? And you got a guy in Pedro who, technically wise, skill wise, yeah, he can meet him on the feet. He looked very good in his last fight, working over at City Kickboxing now, utilizing his range much better, picking and choosing his spots much better. He's got a tricky ground game. That's interesting in spots that when he first came into the UFC, it looked like that was kind of his focal point a little bit. So, you know, technical wise and skill wise, and as far as the veteran savvy and having the experience, he meets all those boxes with Petrino. But it's just, you know, a momentum thing for me. It's a activity thing for me, and I don't know how much more Pedro has to give. You know what I mean? And that's what bothers me here. This is a fight, clearly, I think, that they want Petrino to win. I think he's got a lot of upside. Like I said, if you look at the guy, his physique, his athletic ability, his power, everything about him, the guy has very good upside. He's got a decent ceiling, where Pedro, they're feeding him all these lower level guys, and they're trying to help him. They're trying to help him. They fed him Huntsucker. They fed him Villanueva. They still believe in him. They're walking him. But then he comes back and he fights Bukauskas and he loses. Then they give him Pleasure Man and he wins. Now the Pleasure Man was a good fight. It was a good win for him. But it wasn't anything that's going to blow your hair back, because he's not that great in itself. So this is kind of a test for both guys. This is to see, like, where is Tyson Pedro really? Like, where is he? Is he really back? Did he make some kind of evolutionary changes? And also on Petrino is, how is he going to fare against somebody who can kind of meet him technical wise? If he comes in as Tyson Pedro, the good version of Tyson Pedro, how is he going to handle that when the deep water starts coming? And this guy starts getting matched in some spots, you know. So it's an interesting fight, but I just think Petrino's going to catch him. I think eventually, at some point in time, the athletic ability, the explosion, the confidence, the momentum, I think all that plays in his favor here. So I'm going to go to Petrino, and I'm going to go Petrino inside the distance. AlexPerez and Mokaev. Now, this one was really interesting for me to break down, because initially on first look, I was like, he's going to run through it. Like, he's literally going to run through AlexPerez, right? And then I had to take like a little bit of a back step, and I had to say, wait a minute, hold on a second. Let's not jump to conclusions here, right? AlexPerez has fought some really, really tough opposition. I'll just listen to some of these guys, right? Fought Alexander Pantoja, Deiveson Figueiredo, Jussier Formega, Jordan Espinosa, Mark De La Rosa, Joey Benavidez, Jose Torres, Eric Shelton. Like, he's fought some good guys. Like, he's fought some really good guys, and he's only lost, you know, to Joey Benavidez, who is a Hall of Famer, Deiveson Figueiredo, Alexander Pantoja. He's like literally only lost to the top of the heap. He's beat Jussier Formega, he beat Jordan Espinosa, he beat Mark De La Rosa, even though Mark De La Rosa was okay. But I'm just saying, the level of competition this guy has been fighting out of the gate has been, you know, top level. Like, they did this guy no favors. The problem with him is he has issues making weight. He has issues making it to the cage. He has injury issues. He's not consistent. And that's an issue for me. I mean, that's a big issue for me. Is he going to make the walk? I don't even know. I mean, this guy's had so many fight cancellations, it's ridiculous. You know, so, but if you take him from a skill set perspective and you look at him when he's 100% healthy, he's a really good fighter. Like, he's got good striking, he's got good pop in his shot, he's got good wrestling. Like, he's a tough kid. He's a really, really tough kid to handle when he's dialed in, when he's healthy, when his weight cut goes, you know, well. But you just don't know if you're going to get that. And on the other side, you got a very young, up-and-coming prospect that they're super excited about, and Mokaev, who, look at the level of competition he's beaten. You know, Tim Elliott, Fiallo, Malcolm Gordon, Charles Johnson, Cody Durden. Cody Durden alone and Tim Elliott alone, you know, he should get feather in his caps for. And these are all fights within 2022. I mean, this kid's fought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times since 2022. This kid is active. He's healthy. I know he got caught in that one knee bar that everybody was concerned with, where he literally hyperextended his knee, and that just showed what kind of dog this kid is. I think his striking is a little bit of a concern for me in this fight. If AlexPerez comes in completely dialed in, healthy, looks good on the scales, and he can kind of stuff some of the takedowns of Mokaev, I think if this stays on the feet, that's where Mokaev's going to have his issues. I just don't see AlexPerez being able to stop Mokaev taking him down for 15 minutes. I think eventually it's going to get to the floor. I think eventually Mokaev is going to catch his momentum, catch his steam, kind of dial him in and catch his timing. I think the first round can be interesting. I also can see Mokaev grounding him right away in the first round. You know, I just think this kid's a little bit too much for him. I think he's a little bit too much of a new wave of fighter. I think AlexPerez is good, but I still think he's clocked into, not the yesteryears, but he's kind of clocked into before everything really started evolving within the last couple of years. You know, time off, missing weight, missing fights, not super active. Yeah, you're in the gym training, but it's totally different than live time. You know, so I just think Mokaev's going to be too much for him. I think eventually he's gonna snip out the sub. And hand Perez his third loss in a row. Then the UFC's got to decide what they want to do with this kid. And if he doesn't make the weight or he doesn't make the walk, then the UFC knows they got to just part ways with this guy. All right, next fight. We got Umar Nurmagomedov versus Almakhan. I'm going to tell you this right now. I don't know why Umar is a minus 1,000 in this spot. Listen, I'm a big Umar believer. And when I initially saw this matchup, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, what? Like, nobody wants to fight this guy. Like, nobody, and it stands to be true. Nobody wants to fight this guy. But I will tell you this. Bekzat is a good fighter. This ain't some guy that they're just pulling off the street. This is not some guy that they're pulling off the regional circuit because they needed somebody quick. This dude is good. Like, this dude is really, really good. Good to the point where if it stays on the feet for 15 minutes, you're going to have a fight on your hands. Like, this dude has good hands. He's explosive. He's fought a good level of competition. There's no reason why Umar should be a minus 1,000 in this spot, minus 1,200, whatever he is. And I think it's the last name that's pushing the line. I think it's, you know, all the hype behind him, which is clean hype and clear hype. It's good hype. This kid is that good. But this kid that he's fighting Bekzat is no pushover. Like, this kid is no pushover. Like I said, this kid's got really good hands. He's really tough. He's fought a good level of competition. I'm really interested in seeing this fight. Now, I'm picking Umar. Obviously, I think Umar's going to probably end up getting a sub at some point. But I would not be shocked if this is like a really good fight. Like, I would not be shocked at all if this is a really good fight. I'd be like blown away if you know, Bekzat comes in and like finishes Umar or beats Umar. I mean, that'd be kind of crazy to see this kid just come out of nowhere and win this fight. But I would not be shocked if at the end of this fight, like, maybe, I mean, it goes to the cards or we're like, damn, dude, that was like a really close fight. Like, this kid is that good. Like, I don't put anything past this kid. And when you get a kid like this who's coming in and nobody really knows about him, and there's not a ton of film on him, and there's no hype around him, and there's no marketing around him or anything, like, that's a dangerous fight. Those are the dangerous fights. It's almost like, you know, people ask me, like, you know, I've been knocked out before. Yeah, I've been knocked out before. Well, how is it? You don't get knocked out by the punches you see coming. Like, you don't get knocked out you get knocked out by the punches you don't see. So this is kind of that same philosophy. Like, you got a guy coming in that you don't know much about. There's not really a multitude of tape on him. There's no really talk about him, hype about him, you know, in the mainstream. And then you got to go in there and it's kind of like swimming in a lake in the dark. You know what I mean? So he knows what Umar is. He's studied Umar. There's film on Umar. There's so much about him, the hype and the media and the articles and the announcers when he fights talking about what he's good at, what he's not good at, the mainstream film. Like, there's so much on Umar that he can study. This is a little bit of a dark horse coming into the UFC on this card. And let me tell you something. I'm expecting him to lose the fight, but I'm expecting him to do well in the UFC. I'm expecting him to be a good fighter. I think this kid has the opportunity to like make a little bit of a name on himself, even in a loss, to a point where you're like, hey, he lost the fight, but the kid's tough. Like, the kid is tough. I could see the kid doing really well in the future. So I'm excited to see how he fares against someone like Umar. Like I said, I'm going to pick Umar. I'm going to say Umar by late submission. But I wouldn't be shocked if Bekzat gives him some things to handle, you know, before that happens. And I would not touch Umar at minus 1,000. I'm just letting you know that right now. Next one, Matt Schnell and Steve Ursay. You know, Matt Schnell's a guy who, you know, both of these guys are kind of weird, right? When you look at Steve Ursay, he looks like nothing. He looks like almost like a Ryan Hall, like kind of goofy, right? Then you see him fight, and you're like, wow, this kid's like a dog. This kid's tough. He's got good striking, accurate, good power, slick grappling, good transitions, makes really good decisions, pretty durable. He's a breath of fresh air when you see him. I mean, the guy's not a trash talker. Doesn't really care for the camera too much. Kind of goofy, but goes in there and gets the job done. Like, he's very, very economical that way. When you look at Matt Schnell, this is a guy who, I mean, he's done some really good things in the UFC. He's been in a lot of really, really fun fights. One that, comes to mind is the Sumajari fight, where he was literally getting beaten and he just, reversed his fortune and hooked him up with a triangle. That was like one of the sickest, reverses of fortune we've seen probably in that year in 2022 when he did that. So he's got the ability, and but he also has the ability to drag himself into these wars. And when you drag yourself into wars and you don't have the durability to do it, that's an issue. That's a big issue. And he's got no problems with doing it. Like, he has no problems, even though he's got chin issues, even if he hasn't been finished, he's been dropped in numerous fights. He's got no issues with standing in the pocket with you and trading with you. And that's just a wiring issue. That just is something where I could teach you until you're blue in the face, like in camp. Listen, we got to protect your chin. You got to fight a little bit more economical. You can't go in there blazing. Your chin isn't meant for that kind of fight. You're not like a Justin Gaethje. But once you get in there and your instincts take over, that's the problem. And that's what happens with Matt Schnell. His instincts start to take over. Very well-rounded, very aggressive, good striking, fast hands, accurate, good grappling. Like, the kid's got a lot of talent. You got to be careful with someone like Ursay, because Ursay can kind of match him in all aspects. But when you look at the competition of Matt Schnell, I mean, forget about the losses and wins. Let's just go through the guys he's fought. He fought Matthias Nicolau. He fought Sumajari. He fought Brendan Royval. He fought Bontorin. He fought Tyson Nam. He fought Pantoja. He fought Louis Smolka. Like, he's fought so many good guys. Like, this is another guy they did no favors for. Then when you look at a guy like Ursay, yeah, I get it. He's fairly new. He's fairly new. He's only got 2 fights under his belt. He beat David Dvorak and he beat Alessandro Costa. So, okay, he's 2-0 in the UFC, but like, he hasn't really fought that level of competition yet where you could say, well, is it the competition he's facing or is he really that good? So, I almost wish Schnell had a better chin, because I think Schnell's the better fighter, the more, obviously he's the more seasoned fighter. But this fight gets really tight because I think the experience of Schnell, the power of Schnell, the grappling ability of Schnell, and then you have the inexperience of Ursay, but the durability end of it and the fresher legs, and he's got the more wars. It kind of makes it kind of like a cluster, and you get kind of confused. Like, who do I pick here? Do I pick the veteran that has been there before, has been in these wars before, has proven that, yeah, he can get knocked out, but he's also been beaten from pillar to post and found a way back into the fight and win the fight? Or do you go with the guy with Ursay, where he's 2-0 and he's looked great in those 2 fights? I'm going to lean the dog here. There's something to be said about a recovery period, and it can help or hinder you. You get some of these guys who become chinny, who become like very just structured at a certain point after some wars, that their durability just weighs, and then they take this time off, right? And they either come back and they're the same guy or worse, or they come back with a little bit of a rejuvenation in their step. They come back with a little bit more durability. All of a sudden, they grow a beard. Happened with Andrei Arlovski. Remember when he was getting, the guy's chin looked like it was dead? Then all of a sudden, he had like a resurgence. And you're looking at a kid who's not, at that age yet. He's been through wars. Yeah, he is known to be chinny. Yeah, but he has taken time off. Now, I don't know if that's going to hinder him or that's going to hurt him. We're going to find out. But when I'm looking at a skill perspective in this fight, I don't mind taking a little shot on Schnell here as a pick. I don't think I'm going to get there as a wager, but as a pick in a fight where I think he's getting a little disrespected. Over 2-1 odds on this fight. I think he's getting a little disrespected. But like I said, it's all predicated on what has he been doing since December 3rd, 2022. Has he been training? Did he take all this time off? I know he was dealing with some injuries, but how active has he been? I think this can be a really good fight. Like, this could be fight of the night material if his chin holds up. So I'll take a swing on the dog here. All right. I think that might be it for the main card. Like I said, it's a very consolidated main card. The rest of the fights, you got guys like Eric Anders, Jamie Pickett. Believe it or not, I would not go near that fight. I mean, let's just talk about that right now. Eric Anders, Jamie Pickett. I wouldn't go near that fight. Do you trust Eric Anders at like a -3 and change? I don't. Zahabi and Basharat, that could be a really interesting fight. I know that Basharat is very highly ranked as far as like in the minds of us and the minds of the media. But you got a guy in Amin Zahabi who has been putting some wins together, and he's got his brother behind him. When his brother's philosophy starts resonating with you, they become difficult people to fight. They're very, very just honed in. They stick to their blueprint. They're not chaotic. They're very patient. He's got a very different philosophy than a lot of guys. So that could be an interesting fight. Christian Leroy Duncan, Ribeiro can be a good fight. Ludovic Klein is getting a late replacement in Cunningham. He should actually roll through him. And then obviously the one fight in the card that there's not happening is Raul Hossa versus Tercios. In that fight, I got to be honest with you, I'm not buying that he was sick in that fight. I'm not. I think that there was a nerve factor involved there. Maybe he got sick because he was nervous, but this kid walked into the arena. He was completely fine. He was given the sign of the cross. He was shaking people's hands, and an hour later, all of a sudden, he's sick, and he's not fighting on this card. So I'm curious to see what happened with him that he's not fighting on this card either. I think it was something to do with Tercios, though, that he said no. But I got to look a little bit into that, so definitely don't quote me on that. But that's it, man. Like I said, this is not the greatest card in the world. I do believe it's an early fight time, which is good, so it gets over early. I'd be careful with this card. I'd be very careful with this card. I could see this card going a lot of different ways. I know last week I went a little bit cautious as well last week, and still didn't really work out in my favor. So I'm going to probably go cautious again this week, but hopefully it does work out in my favor. But enjoy the fights. We also have some boxing coming up the following week. We have Anthony Joshua is taking on Francis Ngannou. I'll be breaking that down, and I will see you next week.